Welcome to the Thistle Chapel. The chapel looks very old, in the style of 15th century Gothic, but it is the newest part of the St Giles building, built in 1909 and 1911 to house the services of the Order of the Thistle. The thistle is a famously spiky weed with a splendid purple head. Legend tells us that its thorns alerted a Scottish army to a surprise attack by King Haakon of Norway at Largs in Ayrshire on 2nd of October 1263. The Vikings approached barefoot, so as not to be heard, and all went well, until they came to a patch of thistles. Their yells of pain gave them away, the Scots won the battle, and thus the thistle was chosen to be the national flower of Scotland. The order's founder is not certainly known, perhaps James III in the late 15th century, or James V in the mid-16th century. But what we do know is James VII of Scotland, the second of England, claimed to be reviving it in 1687, so it has definitely existed since then. The order's members from before 1687 are not known, but as James VII revived the order, he appointed 8 knights. The number was later increased to 16, with up to 4 additional royal members. The knights from 1687 to 1908 are listed on the ante-chapel walls. Once the Thistle Chapel was built, the record of knights continued inside the chapel, in the form of armorial plates on the back of the seats. This practice continues today. The Order of the Thistle is the highest in Scottish chivalry, the equivalent of the Order of the Garter in England. Membership is an honour bestowed by the monarch. Once reserved for the highest-ranking aristocrats, such as dukes, earls and the like, it is now a recognition of public office, or an outstanding contribution to national life. The knights meet annually with the Queen in the chapel during her summer visit to Holyrood, and annually out in St Giles on the Sunday nearest to St Andrew's Day, 30th of November. Until 1906, the Order and the Knights had no dedicated meeting place. It was in this year that a legacy from the Earl of Leven and Melville of £24,000, a good couple of millions in today's money, made possible the present building. They finally settled on St Giles as the perfect site for the chapel, and appointed Robert Lorimer as architect. Lorimer was the outstanding Scottish architect of his day. He was told to make the chapel as Scottish as possible, with Scottish stone, intricately carved Scottish oak, and, as a final nod to Scotland, the most famous carvings, the 2 little angels playing the bagpipes, were by Fergus Johnston Curry. Inside the chapel are 19 stalls or seats. These are for the monarch, plus 2 royals and 16 knights, and each is surmounted by the heraldic crest of its occupant. The royal arms of Scotland, in all their splendour, front the monarch's throne. An assessment of the chapel from the prominent architect Christopher Hussey states, "Remarkable, unique in its time, a true revival of the medieval crafts. Traditional yet spontaneous and not pretentious. Alive with the Gothic spirit, yet of its own age." Its success was primarily because of Lorimer's approach, essentially that of the medieval craftsman-architect.
When Robert Lorimer was appointed to design the Thistle Chapel in 1909, he faced 2 challenges. First, how to create a grand chapel in such a small site. Second, how to create a space that was appropriate but distinct within St Giles Cathedral. To match St Giles, Lorimer evoked the Gothic architecture of the 15th century. To create a space of outstanding beauty, he collaborated with Scotland's greatest craftspeople. Lorimer used contrasts to make the chapel more impressive. The ante-chapel is dark and unpainted. The ceiling is shallow, low and heavy. Now we walk through the door into the main chapel. The ceiling soars upwards to cover a space filled with colour, light and detail. The ceiling was carved by the company of Joseph Hayes. There are around 200 tons of stone in it, and it stands 42 feet from the ground, so tall that you could stand the length of the chapel upright beneath it, and have 7 feet to spare. The stained glass windows are by Louis Davis, and show the arms of the Knights of the Thistle at the time the chapel was built. The east window is by Douglas Strawn, and shows St Andrew, patron of Scotland and of the Order of the Thistle. Below the windows are the stalls, with a seat for every knight. The most detailed oak woodwork was carved by the brothers William and Alexander Clow. They carved curious details such as rabbits in the royal arms and angels playing bagpipes. The earliest plaques on the stalls were made in shimmering enamel by Phoebe Traquair, and the delicate pendant lamps are by the Bromsgrove Guild. The Thistle Chapel represents a high point of the arts and crafts movement. After it was ceremonially opened in July 1911, King George V received all its craftspeople to recognise their work, and on Lorimer he conferred the honour of a knighthood.
Whilst once the knights were chosen in recognition of their power in Scotland and support of the King and Queen, the order is now used as a way of recognising individuals who have dedicated their lives to making Scotland a better place for its people and advancing the name of Scotland on the international stage. Lady Marian Fraser, the first non-royal female member, was recognised for being a celebrated educator and patron of the arts. She was director of St Mary's Music School and later director of Scottish Opera. Whilst many visitors may look for Sean Connery's coat of arms in the chapel, he is not a knight of this order. But one of the inspirations for Connery's most famous roles, James Bond, is a Knight of the Thistle. Sir Fitzroy Maclean of Dunconnell was a close friend of Ian Fleming and is said to be an inspiration for the world's favourite secret agent. Maclean was a Member of Parliament and a soldier during World War II. Another member of the order involved in World War II was King Olaf of Norway, who requested membership, having served in the Free Norwegian Army, which was based in Scotland during the war. King Olaf is the only royal knight outside of the British royal family. At the moment, Queen Elizabeth II is the head of the order, and Prince Charles and Prince William are members, along with Princess Anne and the Duke of Edinburgh, both of whom have strong Scottish ties.
The backs of the stalls in the Thistle Chapel are covered with colourful coats of arms painted on metal plates, each one belonging to a knight of the Thistle who has occupied that stall in turn since the chapel opened. The art form that produces these coats of arms is known as heraldry, and it came into use in the Middle Ages as a way to proclaim the identity of an individual. The full heraldic representation is known as an achievement and is made up of several sections, the shield, crest and supporters being the most well-known and easily identifiable. The origins of heraldry arise from the need to be identified on the medieval battlefield, where it was vital to know who was who. Heraldry would be displayed on horse drapery, shields, banners, flags and the men's tunics, hence the term coat of arms. The lord at the head of the army would be identifiable by the crest, which he would wear on his helmet. In Scotland, these heraldic arms are registered with the Lion Court, and the use of them is legally protected, rather like a modern-day passport or trademark. A coat of arms can tell much about the individual if you know how to interpret them. The arms may contain a pun on the person's name, or references to where they come from or have lived, perhaps their profession or interests. The arms will also show the status or rank of a person, thus providing a genealogical background to an individual's ancestry. Lord Steele and Lord Cullen, two current knights of the Order of the Thistle, will now describe their coats of arms in a little more detail.
My banner depicts the emblems of the Parliaments at Westminster and Holyrood, in which I served, together with a Scottish tower to denote my restoration of the 16th century Akewood Tower in the borders, together with two steel furisons suggested by the Lord Lion. My bearers are a border reiver. They were the well-known warriors in previous centuries who raided over the border mainly to steal cattle, and a Maasai warrior, indicating the two places that I've lived in, the Scottish borders and Kenya. The motto is a translation of lines from the Scottish poet Robert Burns. The rank is but the guinea stamp, the man's the gold for all that. And the crest is a jaguar, suggested by a friend who passed a Jaguar jeweller with a huge aluminium replica outside. I was president of the Jaguar Drivers Club for 7 years, so that was appropriate. And a silly story to end. Although I owned 10 different Jaguars over the years, mainly second-hand ones and only one at a time, a friend in London had a collection of 12. And when I told him I'd chosen a Jaguar for my crest, he said, "Wonderful, which model?"
For my coat of arms, I chose the church at Whitekirk in East Lothian. I and my wife had a cottage in its parish for over 50 years, and Whitekirk had become part of my title as a peer. So, at the top of the shield, there is a white church for Whitekirk. The area has so much to offer and celebrate, and so at the very top, above my peer's helmet, there is the motto Ruris Honorum Opulenta, meaning rich in the glories of the countryside, and the shield is supported by a pair of roe deer. In the centre of the shield is a 5-barred gate with stone posts of the type which is familiar in County Down, Northern Ireland, from which my wife comes, together with sprigs of holly, an allusion to the possible derivation of my surname in Ireland. The helmet in the base of the shield is a link with the coat of arms of a namesake, who was a distinguished Scottish physician in the 18th century. Below the motto, you can see the scales of justice, referring to the 45 years of my career in the law.